All right, so welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something a listener sent over, a 2025 interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris,
Mm.
and it was on the Call Her Daddy podcast.
Oh, wow. Interesting choice.
Right. You know what I'm thinking.
I think so.
Call Her Daddy is not the podcast about, dating and
Relationships.
and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. That's what makes this so interesting.
For sure.
Why did she choose this platform to talk about these things?
Yeah.
And, what did she share about her personal experiences and what, her policy positions are and all that?
Right.
We're going to find out. We also have a couple articles that were sent over about the interview
Okay.
and how it was, received and the impact and all of that.
Makes sense.
So I'm excited to dive into all this with you today.
Yeah, you're right to point out that this is a pretty unique situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Call Her Daddy host Alex Cooper. She specifically says she wants the show to be welcoming to, everyone. And her goal isn't to, change anyone's political views, but just have an honest conversation about whatever the topic is.
That's interesting. So it seems like Harris is trying to reach an audience that wouldn't typically tune in.
Exactly, yeah. And in the interview, she actually says that she believes in having these authentic conversations and meeting people where they are. So she's going to this audience that's already there.
Okay, yeah. So is that an effective strategy, you think? Could this actually be a way to, close the gap between politicians and younger generations that are maybe
Disillusioned.
disillusioned with the whole political process?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right?
Right.
Some people think that showing up on a show like Call Her Daddy could, humanize a politician.
Make them more relatable.
Make them more relatable, exactly.
Yeah.
Others might say it trivializes the issues, right? Or the message might get lost in the entertainment aspect.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely raises some questions about how things are changing with political communication, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into the content of the interview.
Okay.
One of the things that stood out to me was how she uses her personal experiences to illustrate her policy positions.
Are you talking about the story about her best friend Wanda?
Yes.
In high school?
It's so powerful, and heartbreaking, and it really seems like it impacted her.
For sure.
She talks about how this experience fueled her passion for protecting vulnerable people and led her to become a prosecutor.
Right. Specializing in sexual assault cases.
Exactly.
That's a key thing to consider.
Yeah.
Because that experience might have informed her approach to prosecution.
Oh, for sure.
And later on, even her policy decisions as a senator and as vice president.
That's right. It's not just some
abstract
concept. Yeah. It's rooted in something real and, painful.
Right.
And she connects this experience to her work on issues like reproductive rights and domestic violence.
She talks about how they're all connected, these issues, right? And they all come from this belief in protecting women.
Okay.
And giving them the autonomy to make choices for themselves.
This leads to her discussion of abortion bans.
Yes.
And she paints, kind of a stark picture of the challenges that women face in these states.
With abortion bans.
With the abortion bans, especially the financial burdens on the women who have to travel out of state to get care.
Right. It becomes less of an abstract legal argument and more about the reality of women having to arrange childcare.
Yes.
And figure out the money for travel.
And navigate these
potentially hostile environments.
Yeah. And she really doesn't shy away from the emotional toll either.
No, not at all.
She also mentions that she was the first president or vice president to visit a reproductive health clinic while in office.
Yeah. That's significant, right? Because on the one hand, you could see it as a symbolic gesture, right? Of supporting women's health care and recognizing these clinics are important.
Right.
But you could also see it as a way to combat this narrative that politicians are out of touch with what women in America are facing.
Absolutely. It's a really fascinating look into how she approaches this,
Yeah.
Really complex issue. Another thing that stood out was her attitude when talking about the challenges she's faced in her career.
Yeah.
She talks about being told no so many times.
You're too young.
Too young.
Yeah.
And how she never let that stop her.
It comes up over and over again in the interview. She even says, I think she says, don't hear no.
Right.
It's this...
like a mantra.
Like a personal mantra.
Yeah.
It's a powerful message, especially for women who are told they can't do things.
Or they should,
Stay in their lane.
Stay in their lane. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it speaks to her resilience
Yes.
to break barriers.
Yeah.
It goes with that whole message of empowerment, right?
Yeah.
Challenging the status quo is like, she wants to inspire other people, especially young women,
Right.
to fight for what they want.
To achieve their dreams and not let anyone tell them.
Yeah, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it fits with that whole vibe of call her daddy. Like,
Exactly.
go for it. Like,
Embrace your ambition.
Yeah.
Challenge expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's interesting how she adapts her message to the show,
The context.
but still stays true to her values.
So by choosing this unconventional platform, is she saying that the traditional methods don't work?
Especially for younger generations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how things are done.
Yeah.
It suggests that to reach a wider audience, you have to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Embrace new media.
Yeah.
New ways of communicating.
This interview is making me think about how political messages are made and shared in the 21st century.
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll look at the impact later on.
Okay.
But before we do, I want to talk about another powerful moment
Okay.
where she addresses a comment made by her opponent's VP pick,
Okay.
J.D. Vance.
About women without children.
Yes. The childless cat lady's comment,
Yeah.
it was dismissive.
It was offensive.
Offensive, and it sparked a lot of backlash.
Yeah, a lot of people saw it as this harmful stereotype that a woman's only worth something if she has kids.
Right.
It highlighted the pressures and judgments women face about family and motherhood.
Yeah.
All of that.
And Harris doesn't just let it slide.
Right.
She addresses it head on, and she connects it back to her earlier points
Okay.
about women being judged and the need to lift each other up.
What's interesting is that she doesn't just condemn the comment.
Right.
She puts it into a larger pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
A way to put women down
Right.
and diminish them.
She says something like, the measure of a leader is based on who you lift up, not who you beat down.
Exactly. A powerful response.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that message of empowerment and challenging expectations.
All right. Okay, so we've talked about the unusual context of this interview, the way she connects her personal experiences to her policy positions,
Right.
and her emphasis on empowerment, challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
What else stands out to you so far?
I think it's fascinating to see her navigating this really complex world of modern political communication, right? Going on, call her daddy was a risk, but it opened up this new way to reach people who wouldn't normally listen.
Right.
So she's carefully crafting this message
Yeah.
that appeals to them, but stays true to herself.
So is she acknowledging that the old ways don't work anymore?
Right, especially with younger generations.
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is, yeah.
About how politicians should engage with the public. I'm really curious to see how this approach played out in terms of public perception.
Right.
And did it actually change anything?
And that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay.
We'll look at what those articles say about the impact of all of this.
Okay, perfect.
Did it start a real conversation?
Yeah.
Did it lead to any actual change?
That's what we'll find out.
That's what we're going to grapple with
Okay.
as we keep going with this deep dive.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. So one of the things that keeps coming up in the interview is language.
Yeah.
Not just in politics, but how we talk about women in general.
Right. It's more than just words.
Right.
She's saying that language can reflect these biases.
Yeah, these power dynamics.
Right, exactly.
And she uses some pretty strong examples to make that point.
Yeah, like what?
She brings up Trump, some of the things he said about women in the past.
Okay.
Especially his comments on abortion.
Yeah.
How he attacks women in politics.
Yeah. She does not hold back, does she?
No, not really.
She seems to see it as this symptom of a much bigger problem.
Yeah, her point is that those comments weren't just, off the cuff. They were part of a pattern.
Yeah.
To put women down and silence them.
And she's saying that has real consequences.
Absolutely, yeah, in how women are seen and how they're treated.
It ties in with another interesting point in the interview.
Okay.
When Alex Cooper asks Harris if there's any law that lets the government decide things about a man's body.
Right.
And obviously...
The answer's no.
The answer's no.
Yeah.
And just the fact that she even has to ask that question says a lot.
It really highlights that double standard.
Right. Like, women haven't had the same rights.
For a long time.
Yeah, especially when it comes to their bodies.
Yeah. It's a really good point.
Yeah, it makes you think.
It does.
And it leads back to Harris's main argument, right?
Yeah, that women's rights are human rights.
Exactly. It's not just a women's issue.
It affects everyone.
Right. It's a fundamental human rights issue.
Right. And then the conversation shifts a little bit.
Okay.
Cooper brings up something that a lot of young people worry about.
Okay.
That politicians, they make all these promises and then
Nothing happens.
nothing happens.
Yeah.
And it makes people feel
Disillusioned,
apathetic.
Right. It's hard to stay engaged when you feel like no one's listening.
Exactly. And to her credit, Harris doesn't sugarcoat it.
Okay.
She acknowledges that people are frustrated,
Right.
even angry
With the system.
with the system, yeah.
But she doesn't just offer empty promises.
Right.
She talks about what she's actually done.
A track record.
Yeah, as proof that she's fighting for what matters to young people.
Like student loan debt relief, affordable housing,
Okay.
supporting small businesses.
So things that actually affect their lives.
Exactly, their everyday lives and how they're doing financially.
She's focusing on action, not just talk.
Right, like
Yeah.
change is possible, but it takes work. And it happens little by little.
It's not going to happen overnight.
No, not at all. And then at the very end of the interview, she has this call to action.
Okay.
She tells listeners to vote.
Get involved.
Yeah, even when it's hard.
Yeah, she's basically saying giving up isn't the answer.
Yeah, she's like, look, I've been there,
I know it's hard.
but we can't give up.
It's a powerful message,
It is, yeah.
especially coming from someone who's obviously been through a lot.
Right,
Okay, we've covered a lot.
we have.
This unusual interview, the personal stories,
The importance of language.
the need to keep fighting for change. But the big question is, did any of this make a difference?
Did it actually have an impact?
That's what we're going to look at next.
Yeah, we'll dive into those articles you said
Okay.
and see what they say about the public's response
Okay.
and the long-term effects of this whole thing.
Okay, so we talked about what Harris had to say in the interview.
Right.
Some of the key themes. But now I want to get into, like, what happened after.
The aftermath.
Yeah, the aftermath. What was the reaction, and did it actually do anything?
Okay, well, the articles you sent over
Right.
show that the response was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Some people loved it.
Mm.
They said it was great that she went outside of the usual political stuff
Yeah.
to talk to younger people.
On their level, yeah.
Right. On their level,
Makes sense.
they thought it was bold,
Hmm.
that it could help bridge that gap between politicians and young people who were, like, checked out of politics.
I get it. It was risky.
For sure.
But it sounds like it worked for some people.
Right. They liked that she was meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
But, of course, not everyone was happy.
Right.
Some people thought the show wasn't the right place.
Yeah, call her daddy.
Yeah. For a serious talk about politics.
Too focused on relationships and all that.
Exactly. They said it made the issues seem less important. Like she was just trying to be cool.
To appeal to the younger crowd.
Yeah.
So it sounds like she was trying to do a lot.
Yeah, reach new people.
But not lose her old supporters.
And not seem fake.
Yeah, tough balance.
Really tough. Especially these days with all the different ways people get their news and information.
Right.
It's hard to know how to talk to everyone.
Okay, so besides the initial reactions,
Yep.
what about the long-term impact?
Right, like did it change anyone's minds?
Yeah, did it actually do anything?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, of course.
But there are some interesting things in those articles.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, right after the interview, a lot more people started searching online.
For what?
Things about abortion access.
Oh, wow.
Voter registration, too.
Okay, so people were curious at least.
They wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
Some articles even talked to young people
Okay.
who said the interview made them think differently about things, or even made them want to get involved in politics.
That's cool. So maybe it had some effect.
It planted some seeds,
But what about actual changes?
like policies.
Yeah, policy changes or changes in how the public thinks.
That's harder to measure.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what one thing caused what,
Right?
but the articles do suggest that maybe it helped change how people view these issues.
Especially younger people.
Yeah, maybe like a ripple effect.
Okay. Not a huge wave,
Right.
but still something.
Yeah, and remember, social change takes time.
Right.
Lots of different things have to happen.
It's not just going to happen overnight.
No, and one interview isn't going to completely change everything.
That makes sense.
I think this interview is a good example
Of what?
of how politicians can try new things.
To reach different people.
Yeah, and maybe start a conversation.
Makes you wonder what other new approaches might work.
Right, to get people interested who have given up on politics.
Oh, right.
Yeah, lots to think about.
It does. It really does. This has been so interesting.
It has.
You know, we started with this interview,
On a pop culture podcast.
and now we're talking about all these bigger issues.
Yeah, how political communication is changing
The power of personal stories.
and how hard it is to change the world.
It shows that even when things feel divided,
there's still hope.
Yeah, for connection and understanding.
Maybe even progress.
What are your takeaways from this?
What's stuck with you?
What are you still thinking about?
Those are good questions.
Yeah, and remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Keep thinking about these things.
Talking about them.
Yeah, and maybe even do something to make a difference.
Make the world a little better.
A little more just...
A little more fair.
Yeah,